I look at it like my economics and my English teachers, like my favorite teachers, that I had growing up. Those teachers had a knack for salesmanship because they had a knack for making it relatable to everybody. They found some sort of passion within themselves that they were able to communicate and make it seem like, hey, this actually is kind of fun. When you can make people who have no interest in what they're learning suddenly become interested in what they're learning, I think that is when you've done your job as a coach or a teacher.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Roe Show. This week we have Coach Lain, who is an expert in tumbling and cheer technique. What's unique about Coach Lain is that he really focuses on psychology more than most, and in this episode we discuss different psychological principles in coaching. Psychology is a tough subject because there are no definite answers, and this means that many shy away from the deeper questions since there isn't an easy pathway to success. We will discuss some of these deeper questions and critically look at coaches' implementation of psychology and exchange a few great stories from each of our coaching backgrounds. If you are a young or older coach looking for a bit more outside the box thinking, then this episode's for you. Okay guys, let's go.
I listened to your podcast with the fearless stuff, and I was like, okay, this is going to be very interesting. And I would to bounce some ideas that we were throwing around this morning off of you, because I obviously going and this is your thing, this is your bread and butter. So I love to because the psychology, biology I understand is yes through research and practical experience, but nothing formal. So I like to be able to actually almost look at an informal version of it versus a formal version, see what's the similarities, what's the differences.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've actually I've met a couple other psychologists, unknowing that they were psychologists, just in conversation, and they'd say, hey, well, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a performance coach, but my real passion is fear, and I'd start talking about that, and they're like, oh, okay. And it's funny, after I learned that they were psychologists, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. They were like, no, you do pretty well for not having a degree or anything in this. And I was like, okay, well, let's hope it stays that way.
That's very good. So are you actually in school for psychology, or is this just something you picked up on your own?
Something I picked up on my own as a passion. And, I like to call myself a fear psychology enthusiast, but it's something that I have been given some serious thought about going back to school for, in terms of in a very focused way. I've looked into getting certified as a applied neuroscience coach. So there's that possibility, or there is the possibility of getting an actual degree in psychology in applied neuroscience, or probably just it'd probably have to be a therapeutic degree or some sort of therapy, like psychology and therapy, dealing with fear. So, but it's something I've definitely put my 10,000 hours in just at home personally, researching and stuff like that, because every case that I deal, and kind of like what we were talking about last time, but every athlete that I deal with that is struggling from a mental block, I have to go in and really play tumble detective, and be like, okay, let's really figure out what's going on here. So
that is very cool. I wish more people took it seriously. One of the things we discussed right at the start with Mike was that a lot of coaches think that they're being psychologists when at the end of the day they're not really applying it. They might read it out of a textbook and say, oh, so and so said to do this and this cognitive blah blah blah. Okay, I get it. I already do that, and so they rationalize how they're already doing it, and then they never actually perform it, and then it becomes an issue. What are your thoughts on that? Have you experienced that?
I would agree with that to an extent. I think that there are a lot of people, a lot of coaches that will do one of two things. They'll either repeat and regurgitate a lot of what they've heard before without actually researching it or asking themselves, well, why is this in the first place? And then there's those that will, that have done some research and understand something to an extent, but then kind of, again, regurgitate it or repeat it in their own way without actually like making sure they're applying it properly. And then I've even heard coaches kind of do what I do, where they're giving like some great psychological advice and then completely negating it or counter what is the word? Um, kind of, basically going back on what they just said from a
Yeah.
psychological standpoint, and telling an athlete to do something or using words that contradict, that's the word I was looking for, contradicting what they just told them a second ago. So I guess that last point is to agree with what you just said, that they will say one thing and then they won't apply it to their actual coaching, because their actual coaching, the physical skill, comes with just repeating or rehashing what they've learned themselves without actually, applying it to the athlete or to the situation or to the struggles that that athlete is dealing with.
Well, that's the tough part about psychology, is that there's no real answer. It's almost like a abyss. And when I first started researching heavily, and it was about 8 years ago when we really hit the road, and I had
Yeah.
to realize, what are we doing? What am I doing? I had to start figuring out what the world was all about. And the more I got into it, the more I realized I didn't know what the hell was going on. And even though I could read the books and read the texts and understand what they were talking about, it didn't really help me understand the real hard, like, existential questions of like
Right.
free will and this, that, and the other. And that's where I like to go. Some
Yeah.
coaches like that, and I like to get that right in the forums. Like, all right, guys, what power does religion play on your coaching behavior? And the response I get when I post this in the forum is, why would it matter? Any psychologist.
Oh,
Any psychologist would be like, excuse me, like, we're not
right.
debating which religion. We're just saying, does a belief system in your mind affect your behavior? To say it
Right.
does even have an effect, we're not saying what the effect, we just said, does it have an effect? And that
Right.
just, they couldn't get past that barrier, that you would even ask that question, never mind even try to develop an answer. That's the part that scared me a little bit, that said, okay, so what happens if I throw some real Nietzsche at you, or some real Dostoevsky, or something seriously deep at you? What are you gonna do then?
Yeah.
You know?
It's really funny because, I think you and I touched on this last week when we were kind of getting to know each other, and you were kind of getting to know a lot of my philosophy. And a big part of my philosophy is understanding how discomfort is the antithesis of what the human brain is designed to allow. Like, uh, it prefers comfort. It's always seeking out comfort because comfort is safe, and comfort is routine, and comfort is complacent. It's that onboard computer that was designed to keep the vessel safe. And so if the vessel is deciding to do something that seems outside of our comfort zone, the brain is going to fight against that just naturally, because new is unknown and scary and possibly could cause harm. So it's just, it's a risk calculator. So it's trying to calculate, okay, what are the, but
Load of belt.
yeah, but I think that two things to what you said. The one thing is, people don't like new ideas because it makes them uncomfortable. They don't like applying those. It takes them out of their wheelhouse. It takes them out of that place where they know what they know what they know. And I think that discomfort right there is what discourages them from applying a new idea. And the other thing is, fear is highly contextual. Psychology is highly contextual. Like, it has to be put inside of social, cultural, spiritual, even historical context.
It's,
So
yeah. And I think that's one thing. And me and Mike this morning were talking about that. And it's a lot of coaches, I think the big mistake they miss is that they think that fear is only behavioral. They don't understand it's like the reality that's in your mind. So when you see this couch here, then if I had a bad experience with that couch, just seeing the couch itself is enough to trigger that response. And so when an athlete says, "Oh, I have a fear," the first thing we do is say, "Get off that piece of equipment, go somewhere else. Change
right,
the sequence, change the environment that you're in, change different directions. I don't care. Everything is
right,
different." And I think a lot of people, and not just coaches, obviously, like just people in general, don't understand how consuming psychology is to every little thing that you
Yeah.
take for granted. And once you start digging through that, you will get lost. You'll get, was it Nietzsche that said, the abyss, you stare into the abyss long enough, they'll stare back at you. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's like that. And psychology does do that. It scares the poop out of people.
Yeah,
Right?
and yeah, it really does, and I think that knowing that the hyper awareness of discomfort will discourage anybody from traversing down, a rabbit hole that they are unfamiliar with. I One of my big philosophies is I don't make you do things that I haven't done or wouldn't be willing to do myself as a coach. Now, of course, there was uh, um, a plateau to my training as a self-taught athlete and as someone who was in a gym where they weren't able to teach higher level skills and stuff like that. Sure, but for the most part, if I understand the mechanics and the movement, you better believe I'm going to teach it to you. But it's funny because when it comes to the fear, that's something that is empirical through and through for me. Whether it's the athletes that I've worked with, the hundreds of thousands of athletes that I've worked with, or the experiences I've experienced myself. That level of discomfort, that was something that I knew from personal experience. There was something that I was terrified of, and it wasn't that I was, I didn't have to conquer that fear. I didn't have to like defeat that fear. I had to face it to understand it better and understand myself and say, okay, why am I fearful? What is this doing? And that experience taught me what I'm doing is confronting a discomfort. I'm learning to get comfortable being uncomfortable because this discomfort may never leave me. So it's something I had to, get to a place of comfort with. Um, and I think what I've witnessed is that is what 99% of humanity is basically unwilling to do is get uncomfortable on purpose. It's really interesting.
That's funny because Mike Gillette this morning was saying the same thing. He basically he goes around, does workshops with different gymnast clubs and other sports outside of gymnastics, which makes him almost like a impartial sort of
Yeah,
onlooker. And he was
same.
saying that in gymnastics, it's very common that coaches will train their athletes to be comfortable. Parents will tell kids they have to be comfortable all the time. It's always,
Yes.
can I make this easier for you? And Mike's like, no, no, I don't want to make this easier for you. I want to give you the
Right.
reality. There are risks, there are dangers, and you should be scared. If you're not, you're probably a psychopath. And it's better for me to be upfront with that and be realistic, but
Yeah.
then work different, cognitive strategies and different stuff like that, and different behavioral therapy sort of things. But at the end of the day, it's just that first starting block is that it's like, and I've seen this in gymnastics. Tell me if you have seen this as well. But over my 25 years, I've seen that, back when I was, 9 years old, back in the 90s, literally, it was, you have to do it. Too bad, so sad. There's no comfort. Conditioning for 2 hours a day, equipment only for a bit more. Now
Yep.
it's changed, and it's almost like the coaches now are looking at like, well, if I can just protect them and make them feel good, that will give them confidence. But it really
Mm.
does the opposite by you doing it. It's like saying, oh, well, if I hold your hand, crossing the street, well, then doesn't that really tell the kid that they just are too stupid to cross the road?
Mm.
And they almost have the whole thing backwards by babying them into submission rather than saying, stand up, I'll teach you how to stand up, but you're going to have to stand up. And
I think one of the things that I've noticed doesn't that upsets me is that I'm not seeing enough of the technical knowledge being taught at the micro skill level. You know what I mean? Where like if I'm not gonna monkey see monkey do teach you how to do a back handspring by saying just do that, like pointing at somebody doing and say just do that, or showing you a video. I've heard this so many times, and it upsets me every time that there are people actually charging parents money to basically be a bloodhound and pointing, to their children like, yeah, just do that, instead of actually saying, well, I want to give you comprehensive knowledge at every level of your skill so that if I'm teaching you explosive toes and strong reach and, a strong torso and shape changes and et cetera, now we could put all that together and construct a skill. Um, so I think that's probably what the injustice that I witness is that the from a physical standpoint, the coaches aren't teaching technical skill at a micro skill level, and then psychologically, it's the rhetoric that everybody just regurgitates, things they've seen on Instagram, on Pinterest, things that we just adages that we've said, over the years that make no sense and actually are being counterproductive. Um, that's the other thing that always really gets to me. I'm like, you haven't challenged yourself to come up with a new way of saying something, So I think that would be my call to arms for most coaches and parents, especially because you think the parents are the ones that are driving the kids to and from the practices, and they're the ones that are reinforcing what they've heard the coaches say, or they're reinforcing things that they've read themselves in forums. You know, so I
Yeah,
think
it's not really encompassing with a clear storyline that actually follows what the data suggests. It's
like
more
that.
like bits and pieces of, like you said, rhetoric that just sound nice in the moment. It's like they went and found top100coachingquotes.com.
Right, right,
I'll say
exactly.
that together and say, this is my philosophy. And it's like,
Right.
hey, well, how does that work for someone who hasn't already been in your system for the last 2 years, that hasn't just kind of on autopilot and you're taking credit, even though, take that kid somewhere
Mhm.
else, do something different, and then let's see how it works. Because if you're really a psychology person, you're not limited by saying it has to be in the gym. You're not limited by saying it has to be this type of equipment or this skill. You could teach someone violin and never have
Mm,
done it. If you understand the psychology and the building process, you
I
could
like
do
that.
all of that. And that's where I don't think that they understand how in the box they really are a lot of the time.
I like that too, that you were saying, you're reinforcing the do something different. One of the things that whenever I have an athlete that is experiencing a mental block, and well, maybe we can go over why I always do the rabbit ears.
Heard your podcast. I wanted to ask you about that.
But one of the things when I the first thing that I do is like, okay, especially if I can't be there physically to witness what they're going through, and they're just kind of using text or video to communicate that, I'll say, well, look, let's get you to a point, let's get you out of that environment, right? Let's, because what you're saying is right. Like the brain is all about association. It's how we take shortcuts in processing. Um, it's how we get from A to Z a lot faster than having to go through a process in its entirety.
Yeah.
So I'll say let's get you out of that environment where you feel like you're experiencing that anxiety, and let's get you back to a place where you are confident. Like if you're struggling with your tuck, then go back and exhaust your back handspring for the next 2 weeks. There is nothing wrong with that comprehensive knowledge that you'll gain from doing a skill over and over and over. Or let's get you, instead of doing your tuck on your trampoline, let's have you do some drills on the floor and get you at least confident in your body awareness, your proprioception, and your muscle memory. So I think that you hit the nail on the head there. That getting them disassociating that thing that makes them so nervous and anxious is huge. And I agree. If you don't understand that, then that is a clear sign that you are very much trapped in a boxed way of thinking.
Well, for me, it's that, and this is again, me and Mike were talking about this, is that, a lot of coaches, again, they think that they are doing that. They'll change
Yeah.
one little micro aspect of something, and all of a sudden they think that the athlete's brain is somehow now different. They haven't completely switched gears, and
Right.
like almost trying to throw off the kid. I always feel like when, like, I had this girl that I was trying to do back handstrings with her. She was scared of it, so all I did was I just said, "Oh, okay." She's like, "Okay, well, I want to learn back handspring. I have to learn." I'm like, okay, well then, let's go over here and play a game instead. What? What do you mean play a game? And right there, that's where the disassociation happened. It doesn't
Yep.
happen at let's go over here and change the drill. No, because now you've just connected it. You've made the association. You just kept the association going. You just
Right.
changed the stimulus. The association itself isn't any different. And all I did was just change it up. And she was doing front handsprings, side cartwheels, all these different stuff. We were playing these games, and she all of a sudden I come back. She doesn't even realize she could do it, and she was doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, oh, okay, I didn't know. And it's almost like you got to trick them into disassociating. So when a coach says I can do it by telling them I'm doing it, not the biology I've heard or experienced in my life.
Yeah. I think what one of the strengths of the way that I teach like a back handspring is that I will use different words, and I will use a different. It's similar in the movement and the mechanics of the movement, but right away I'll tell them, I'm gonna. I'll say, do you mind if I teach you the way that I teach it? And they're like, sure. I'm like, okay, cool. And so then, I'll start breaking it down into the micro skills and using the different language that they've heard. So, and then usually when we put it back together that first time, I'll be like, is that different? And they'll be like, oh my God, yeah. And it's not that it's better, it's just different. And so they're not having that same association with what they were doing. And that's the first thing I'll tell them too, is like, understand, when you go back to doing this, you're going to have to be aware of the changes that we make and actually force yourself to stick to those changes. Otherwise, by default, your implicit memory is going to kick in and you're going to go right back to doing the skill you were doing before. So you have to rewire your muscle memory basically to doing something new. The other thing I was going to say off of what you said with disassociation, that's why Tony Robbins uses vulgar language at his seminars. It,
Exactly.
it snaps that person out of being in their own head. Right.
New thing.
Right. Wait, what? That's so culturally just objectionable. And he's like, yeah, I know, but you see how you're not thinking about that thing you were obsessing about 2 seconds ago.
Yep.
Now you're in my court. Now I can mold you to help you and help you get out of your own way. So.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's take a step back for a second.
Sure.
Mental block. What is your deal with that term? Apparently you hate that term.
I abhor that term. Like, I loathe it simply because it's overused, especially in the cheerleading and gymnastics worlds. I can only vouch for cheerleading. I assume, because I've had gymnasts approach me and say I have a mental block. I loathe it for the same reason that I was saying earlier, with the associations that it has and the rhetoric that is used to enforce the idea of what the athletes are struggling with. So, I used to be a designer, graphic designer, and I noticed one day, because there was an overlap in my graphic design career and my coaching career. And so I noticed, I was like, I got my design friends talking about a creative block. I've got my athletes talking about a mental block. Why do we use this word block? And is there a crossover? Is the secret to getting over a mental block the same as getting over a creative block? And then, so over the years, I've been developing a psychological approach to mental blocks. In my research, I learned that by definition, a mental block is one's inability to recall specific information or a mental process. It has nothing to do with the physical side of what you are attempting to do. A mental block is strictly a mental block. There's two very popular examples I like to give when I'm giving this speech. The first is lethologica. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Lethologica, you may have not heard of, but you've experienced probably multiple times this week already. Lethologica is tip of the tongue syndrome.
Oh, I have that all the time.
Same here. I had it during this interview so far. So tip of the tongue syndrome is a perfect example of a mental block, because that is your inability to recall mental information or process or a word or whatever, perform a mental action. The other one, guaranteed, every human being has experienced this probably within the last hour, is threshold syndrome. When we go from one room to another and we forget why we went to that other room.
Go up the stairs and you forgot what you were going for. Go back down, then you remember. Then you go all the way back again. Yep.
And that's because the brain's cache system wipes itself clean when entering a new space. Even if you've been there hundreds of thousands of times, it's wiping that cache system clean, mostly from like an evolutionary standpoint, to protect us from, being in a new surrounding. It allows us to take in all of our new surroundings and, say, okay, here's the space that I'm focused on right now. Those are perfect examples of mental blocks. A creative block is also a mental block, like writer's block, or an artist not being able to figure out what they want to, draw, or how to convey an idea into something, a visual medium. The reason that I hate when we use the term mental block for an athlete or a gymnast, again, because it has nothing to do with their physical ability. And from a sports psychology aspect, what you're actually experiencing is called a performance anxiety. And that's your the anxiety that arises from the thought of having to do something physical that you're uncomfortable doing, that you have low confidence doing, or that you don't fully understand. And so the risk and the threat of injury is so high. Maybe it's not even the injury, maybe it's the pressure of performing. It's these things that cause this anxiety within us to perform. And it's funny because anxiety has a stigma, right? So a lot of people are like, well, I don't have anxiety, I'm not anxious. It's like, yeah, but you actually are. When you get down to the to brass tacks, this is actually what you are experiencing, a performance anxiety. Calling it a mental block is erroneous, and I feel like it's irresponsible for us as coaches to allow them to reinforce that idea, because it's not addressing the issue, right? By saying you have a mental block, I'm not actually telling you anything that's going to help you to outperform that.
I
And
think
that's
you're
why I like,
categorizing them, and if anything, making it worse, because now you're making it a stigma. You're labeling it, which brings it into existence as words come out of your mouth. It's now an external from you, therefore it exists now. And now all of a sudden the kid just basically got what the kind of worries were, just basically got reaffirmed. Is that
right.
what?
Yes, thank you. That was perfect the way you said it. And it is making them think that there's something wrong with their mental, with something wrong with my brain. I've had so many kids say there's something wrong with my brain where I just can't do it. No, you're a human. Jumping upside down on your hands and flipping is the antithesis of what the brain considers to be safe. You're a human, and so almost at every point of your development as an athlete, you're going to be battling. The body and the brain are trying to find a harmony, and it's like being in a contentious relationship where that one person is just the problem, where they just refuse to like understand the other. The brain is just like, no, I don't care what you say, this is dangerous, I don't approve. And so what I try to affirm and use instead is performance anxiety. And I always try to make that distinction and qualify it and tell people, here's why I don't agree with it. I'm not just gonna be like, oh, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. There has to be a reason why. And it's not that it's wrong, not that I'm right. Like Gary Vee says, if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, who the F cares? But I do believe, yeah, I do believe that it is causing more harm than good by using this term and not helping athletes to understand just how the brain works. This is something natural that the brain is doing. And the funny thing is, anxiety and excitement, the brain employs very similar physical symptoms to communicate that you're either anxious or you're excited. They're very similar. Heart palpitations and the fluttering of the heart, nervous butterflies in the stomach, as they say. Sweating profusely, shortness of breath. Sweaty palms, all that stuff. I could say, describe those, and you'd be like, oh, that person's anxious, or some people might say, oh, that person is excited. So it's really interesting.
Well, it's interesting that I like your perspective that, by bringing more light to it, you're just now creating more of a problem. And like you said, it's not really a mental problem that you have. There is a mental block. So I understand from a physiological perspective, like the neurons attached, there is a blocking of the neurotransmitters. So that's where that term comes from. I get that.
Right.
But it's not really a mental problem. It's more of the fact that you just are not able to do the thing you're trying to tell yourself that you should be able to do. It's almost like the idealist who thinks the world is going to be like this, and then all of a sudden they get hit real hard by everybody else who says, screw you. And
right.
It's like that. And instead, we can just skip that discussion altogether, I think is what you're saying, and get right down to basically disassociating these kind of issues without the athlete even knowing. Why? I don't need to know when everyone wipes their butt or when they do this or this or this. There's certain things you don't need to bring to the gym because all it does is dirty it up. You like that joke? You know what I mean?
You brought it full circle.
I got it. Sometimes they slip away, but and that's why I think it makes it a more happy environment. And when I'm coaching, at least that's what I'm thinking about is, I don't want to talk about focus all the time. I don't want to talk about negativity. I just want to keep everyone happy and joyful and progressing little bits all the time. You don't get this fear problem. I was talking to Travis this morning, and Travis Wong's a good tricking guy, and he's a pioneer and everything. He's asking questions if I have fear. No, not because I'm not psycho, but because of the fact I build things up systematically. That fear is just when your cortex is just trying to get you to do something that your amygdala is basically saying, no, you're not trained for that. I'm ruffling through my hippocampus, and there's no memories here of you ever doing this with any considerable, success. So screw it, basically.
Right, yeah.
That's the bottom line. It's not a new thing that you have to stigmatize, and because now also you get the second backlash of it. You were now basically insulted the kid in some psychological way, but now you've also given the kid an excuse to complain.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, mental block today, coach. I guess I can't do it. Oh no.
Yeah.
Mental block. So get off your butt and go.
Yeah. I think that's what's always bugged me about that. It's like it's an umbrella term for a problem you don't even have, and I like that, like what you said. Yes, from the biomechanical standpoint, there are things that the brain can employ physically to prevent you, or to make you feel like you're prevented from being able to move forward with doing something, right? And this is where I find it very important to make the distinction between biological and psychological fear, so that you understand we're not just using, and that's the problem culturally that we have, is to use fear as an umbrella term for everything we experience, instead of categorizing it like, oh man, I'm scared of snakes. I'm scared of snakes because there's one coming at me right now, biological fear, versus I'm scared of snakes for no apparent reason, psychological fear. You know what I mean?
Irrational. No.
Irrational versus rational. So I think it's very important to make those distinctions when talking to athletes about their fear. Say, okay, and this is why my favorite question is why? Why are you afraid? I had a video I just posted, and I couldn't unfortunately post the entire conversation because my mic cut out, very frustratingly. But oh man. But this young lady, I had never met her before, so this is my first time meeting her, and she was probably like 12, 13, and she said, I have a mental block with my tuck. And I was like, okay, sure you do. So I pulled her, and I was doing a coach's clinic, so I was training coaches. So I was like, hey guys, can I just interrupt you real quick? I was like, Daisy here says that she has a mental block on her tuck. And I was like, tell me why you think you have a mental block. And she was like, because she couldn't come up with the words. She was like, I don't know, because I'm afraid. I was like, why are you afraid? And she couldn't dig a level deeper in that. She was just like, I'm just afraid. And I said, what's interesting is, before I even got on this conversation of why you're afraid with you told me willingly that you had only done the skill a few times before off of a springboard. And so she was just kind of giving me this blank stare. I said, so do you understand why you're afraid? And she said, no. And I said, because you've only done it a few times. It's still new. You haven't drilled the technique. You haven't developed the confidence. To me, confidence is the exact opposite of fear. And confidence, I heard Mel Robbins break down confidence one time in a way that, this was just a couple months ago, and it blew my mind. But she was saying that we think confidence is this thing that we're supposed to naturally have, that, people are always telling you, well, you just have to be more confident. If you really think about it, confidence is a skill just like anything else that you have to develop. And confidence comes from repetition and understanding, right? Yeah. Like exactly. Like if I ask you to write your name, you're going to very confidently, and not even know that you're confident doing it. You're just going to, yeah, there you go. We do it so nonchalantly, and you're like, the only reason you're like that is because you've practiced that, ad nauseum as a child and in school. Like you've secretly been training your confidence in writing your name over
Don't tell
years.
me some extra reps in here with my name.
Right? So, yeah, so that was a really interesting conversation I had with her. And I said, so you've only done it a few times. It's still a new skill. And I said, you have no idea what you're doing in the air. You're just doing, because this was at a place where the coach was hands off. And you and I talked about this guy, this whole idea of being hands off, but it was the bad kinds of hands off. It was the I'm going to tell you to do something and not really give you an explanation why. I'm just going to expect you to do what I say.
Yeah, it's
And
just
so you
these coaches are just, yeah.
and it was really interesting because the kids respected him, but their attempts at performing skills was not to get some sort of satisfaction out of doing what they love. It was to not upset him,
Yeah.
and negate his coaching style. It was really interesting. So yeah, I think we need to stop using these motivational tactics that we see on Instagram and
Well, that's
online.
I have heard apparently sports psychologists in our sport. I won't say much more than that.
There you go.
Know who I'm talking about. And they're we're gonna just fight through it. You can totally rationalize your way through this fear. I'm like,
Conquer your fear.
I want to do that.
Right.
Understand what this is. It just means you're not ready. It's not a sickness. No one injected you with some weird thing. You literally just are basically saying, I haven't dug deep enough into my past to figure out where the missteps were. You're not fight through that. Besides, you can do little mental tricks like distancing yourself and things like that from the situation and change the environment to kind of get past it. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have to go back and fix with the gaps and figure out where it all went off the rails. I had a coach. Oh my God, it scared me. And this coach has criticized us, and I've never called him out on this one, but I was at his, and we were jumping, and the girls wanted to do. They're all learning front flips or something onto the mat. So I was teaching them that if you build it up, it's much easier. You don't have to stand there, because the coach would always hand spot and why don't let the mat do that?
If you have mats, use those as tools.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So anyway, so these kids are all going, they're all lined up like you do in a normal clinic, going a little slower than average, but because, you're all talking through it and everything. And this one girl couldn't get her front flip onto the mat. We were doing 1 1/4 front flips to hands and knees, to double, builders. And she figured it out. All the other girls could. And all they did was keep chanting, come on, you can do it. Whatever the girl's name was, you can do it. Go, go, go. And in my head, I'm like, and this girl's scared. She was almost she was like this, because she was now between a rock and a hard place. And I look at the coach, and the coach is he's proud of the fact they say, yeah, they're rooting for her, they're encouraging her, good for them. And I didn't blame the coach for this, but it just showed me that is not the answer here. So after the girl just shake, I thought she was going to pee herself. So I stepped on the trampoline and said, hey, guys, you're doing this all backwards. What we need to do is take all these mats off together. We all grab a handle. We all disassemble it for her. She helps. And then we rebuild it up. Everyone went quiet. They're like, oh, we weren't supposed to cheer her on. I'm like, not if you don't want her to be pushed over the edge,
Yes.
And then, so we built it up. And she literally came after me. She got it, right? We built it up. It just took smaller steps. It didn't take longer. It was incrementally smaller. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You can pour a whole bunch of salt all at once, or you can do little bits, and then measure it and know exactly how much salt you're going to get. And once we went through there, she came and then hugged me. It's like, oh my God, thank God, I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
Whoa, this girl, she was scared. She was freaked out. Yeah. And it just goes to show, the coaches, high level coaches, are still teaching this. And this is recent. It wasn't 10, 20 years ago. This was, only a few years ago. And it just shows the stigma that they've almost completely miscalculated what this is.
Yeah, I think it's a misstep. It's a missed opportunity, and not understanding, a lot of, and what really gets me is a lot of coaches who were athletes themselves will advertise that they help coach through mental block. I'm a mental block coach. Because you're just employing the methods that you were taught, and because, it worked for you, but not just magically. It's not Trump's, resolution to the coronavirus. It's not just magically going to happen and disappear one day.
China or
It's
Mexico will pay for it.
sorry, I couldn't help myself there. But honestly, it's not some magical solution. And what the athletes who are now coaches teaching this magical, remedy, what they're not understanding is their journey back when they were athletes, because they were going through it every day. They didn't realize all the drilling was helping them with building confidence. They didn't realize all of the, even I listen to you and I think about you. Think about all of the drills, all of the obsession that you had for your craft. All of that was building confidence. And because you started at a young age, correct?
Yeah, I was like 6, 5, five
So
and a half.
starting at an age where you're not even fully aware of your fear yet, you know, that allowed you to focus more on the technique and the execution and get to a point that by the time when your body started changing, where a lot of people really start to develop these mental blocks and performance anxieties, is during puberty, because your body's changing and all the things you learned when you were younger, you're now having to learn for a new body. And so you've developed that confidence and the understanding so that when you got to that point, you were like, yeah, but I know how to damage control. I know how to modify this for this, for this new body, for this new environment. You had that comprehensive understanding. And it's funny because a lot of athletes who become coaches, they forget about those years. They remember the hardship, but they don't remember the monotony. They don't remember the repetition that was building the confidence. And it's
Blocked it
not their
out because
fault.
they hated it.
Right, exactly. Like
They
Muhammad
remember
Ali said, how,
nice words that the coach said because they love the coach, so they
right,
remember emotional things, and that comes with
good
verbal cues
point.
they remember. So they just assume that when they say those verbal cues, they're going to have the same emotional attachment to them that they had, and they forget that this is a completely different specimen that, in all biological
Mm,
honesty, doesn't give two craps about who you are unless you're
yeah,
giving them what they want. And
yeah.
they forget that it is a different entity and it's all value trading, and what you have with the value with your history doesn't correlate to theirs, and it just causes more problems.
You got a nice way of talking, Greg. I like that. I like the way you put that.
I don't know, man. I do a lot of psychology stuff and I banter about this stuff a lot in private. I
Same.
just kind
Yeah.
of come out in publicly because you can probably imagine, and I'm just, this is me just being nice. You know what I mean? If
Yeah,
you
right, right.
psychology and I'm like, okay, what did Freud have to say about this? Let's discuss.
Right. Yeah.
And I won't get into that right now, but I do want to discuss one day with you and have one of
Yeah,
those.
man.
But
Yeah, that'd be great.
well, yeah, just but getting back to the whole mental blocks things, like they've they've miscalculated the difference. They haven't used psychology, and I use this example. It's like economics, every economist think, or back before, not now so much, but it's still in the
Sure.
transition. They think, oh, every human's a rational being. Everyone does what's, utilitarian, all that sort of stuff. And, your utilitarian curves and blah, blah, blah. And okay, well, that's how they're going to live life. So we're going to give them a bunch of theories, and those theories are going to match the rational part of the brain. Well, lo and
Mhm.
behold, all of a sudden we have now like behavioral economics, which is a whole new branch starting in the last couple of years or so, and says, no, humans are basically precisely the opposite of that. And you need
Mm.
to make your economy based on all the subconscious stuff that people don't understand, like consumerism and this, that, and the other. And I think gymnastics has still lagging behind, but I think that there's hope that they'll eventually get through it. There's a lot more talk about psychology, at least, than ever
Yeah.
when I was a kid. It was almost like, you don't talk about that, just get out in the bars and do it, which in
Right.
some sense might have been actually better. So we actually might be taking a step back here. And I know that's probably what you're thinking right now. But I do believe that we can then take a step back out once we've explored that sort of monotony and how it didn't really help. And then maybe that'll be the start of something even better, and we can get to real psychology in gymnastics. That's what I'm hoping
I
for.
No, I think that's great. And what I personally believe, and this is like the this from listening to my podcast. If my tagline is, if we can seek to understand more, we can learn to fear itself less. We can learn to not be afraid of being afraid and learn that, okay, this fear is triggered by, it's a psychological fear. As long as it's psychological, that means that it's usually an irrational fear that is a trigger, that is triggered by your discomfort. So that's your cue to say, okay, I'm about to do something outside of my comfort zone. Outside of my comfort zone is where I grow, where I learn, where I succeed. I should probably just go ahead and take the time to try to understand why I'm afraid of being afraid right now, you know? And I think that if coaches could really grasp that idea, like I said, I'm not here trying to change your mind. I'm just here to challenge your way of thinking. And that's what I like about you is that you challenge people. You're like, okay, well, that's cool that you think that. I personally think it's but here's why I think it's you know? And I like that. I think that it's good that we challenge each other and to think differently about things because then it's just like I don't mind if a kid comes to me for a private lesson this week and then goes to somebody else next week because that next person hopefully isn't undoing what I've taught them, but
But that's the fear that those coaches have.
exactly. But if they do, I understand it because every coach can bring something different to the table.
Well, here's an
And
interesting thought.
yeah,
If they undo it, isn't it a measure of how good of a coach you were that they could redo it if it made sense? Isn't that really putting your coaching on the test?
it
Because
is.
if it takes so easy for one other coach to come in and undo what you did, obviously what you
Right.
did didn't matter because
It didn't matter, right?
they liked it more. And I think it's Skinner that says, knowledge is where it starts where everything else has been forgotten. So, it's what has been actually embedded into your mind to think about it, no matter what other people say. That's
Yeah.
what through coaching is happening. So that would be my
Yeah.
go back and forth on that.
That's the back and forth, the challenge to that. But I
If a coach ever did that to me, that's what I would say to him. Like, nah, they just don't like you.
that's good. I'm definitely gonna use that from now on because I'm like, that just means what you said didn't stick,
Maybe
and that's what I
it's not
hope.
your fault. It's not your fault, but it didn't stick.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. And I think
It could be.
that's where the ego comes in, with coaching. It's like, you take it so personally because if you're the type of coach that's personally invested, if your ego is flaring up just because you think that, your poop don't stink, then that's a whole different thing. But,
Let's leave those guys out of the discussion.
we'll leave those guys out of the discussion. But yeah, I think that it's really important for us to start thinking differently. I agree with you when you said, gymnastics industry hasn't caught up, cheerleading industry definitely hasn't caught up. Those are two industries that are deeply rooted in tradition. Because there are so many, at least there have been. I'm really hoping that the millennial generation and the generations that follow, that they kind of shake things up a little bit and say, there's different ways of doing things, guys. Like I think that there's been too many people that have, well, this is how it was taught to me, and the person that taught me was taught this way as well. So I'm just going to teach it because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's like, and this is the discussion you and I were having when we first talked about, the uniqueness of an athlete versus the strength of the technique that you're teaching. Because I agree with both sides of that discussion. I believe that that there are unique experiences, emotions, and memories and stuff like that that an athlete can bring to the table. But once you've addressed those, the technique will never fail you because the technique is formulaic. So it's like learning how to connect with the athlete might be where you address the uniqueness of their character. But then once you've made that connection, it's like, okay, now let me show you what will never fail you. And that's what I say, you got to stop listening to the lies of your irrational fear and start listening to the truth of your technique. Your technique will never fail you.
That's good. I like that. The truth of your tech. That's very good. And it's funny going back to your point about, well, why wouldn't we progress? And, it's like, well, I could say that theoretically, typewriters got the job done too,
Yeah, right.
Throw your computer out the window and go back to typewriting? No,
Right. That's a good illustration.
Well, it's that simple. Like you're telling me you don't want progress. Oh, we don't want progress when it steps on my territory, but I want progress when Bill Gates is going to make this for me and this and this and this. Then it's okay because that's not my territory, And I just don't like that mentality, And you can see these people, we'll play pool, so we travel a lot, so we always find a local bar and play some pool and stuff. And you can tell the two types of people, right? There's the one that plays pool because they just want to get better at it and they're just focused. It's the winning is secondary. Like if I win, I don't even care. Like they literally forget that they're even playing in the game. They're just so focused on lining up the shot or doing this bank or angle, and they're going for the harder shots. They're going for it. And then there's the ones that are just doing the little baby shots and just trying to, get the game done. And they go, ha, 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 look how awesome I am. It's like, nah, those people lose in the long run, big time, no matter what. No matter what, but, and I think that's what we're fighting is, do you guys see that the world could improve? Because if you just look back in history, you'll realize that obviously what you're saying makes no sense. If you want it to be the same, nothing's ever stayed the same. So you're either riding the wave as best as you can, or you're just, treading water back there with the sharks.
Yep.
I don't see
it. With cinder block bracelets. I've always liked that idea. Treading water with cinder block bracelets.
Treading water. We had to do it for like 8 minutes during my swimming class when I was a kid. I hated it so much.
There's something about swim class that if it wasn't like your priority, it was just annoying. I remember we had to do the same thing in like 4th grade. We had to go to the YMCA and we had swim class, and it was just this whole to do. And I was just like, you guys are ruining swimming for me right now. But looking back on it, it was getting me out of my comfort zone, and it probably taught me a very valuable lesson. If I was looking at it as,
well, then here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If you were the swimming coach, how would you have made it so that you now, how many years later, would have stayed with swimming? What would you have done differently from that coach that would make you actually enjoy treading water? Because I think that's the trick to coaching, is getting people to want to do it. It's the salesmanship that we were talking about. What would you do so that, later on that coach doesn't have to hear you say this?
Right. I would do what I always try to do, and I started doing it unknowingly, but make some sort of real life association with what I'm teaching you. Something that is applicable to every human being, so that even though I'm teaching 12 individuals how to swim, and maybe only 2 out of those 12 really enjoy the mechanics of it, and maybe only one of them enjoys, can relate to it, sociologically or psychologically or, whatever. I would try to get them all on an even playing field and bring up some sort of real life illustration or association, kind of like your typewriter analogy, like do something that they can relate, that they all can relate to, and find what I like, try to communicate what I find to be enjoyable about it. For me, with tumbling, for instance, it's the physics of it all. I love just the beauty of movement and the laws of motion that allow us to do certain things and forbid us to do other things, like the fact that we all are confined by these laws of gravity and motion, I think can allow us all to relate to that movement, even if it's something that, I'm not really into. This guy's not as into it as this girl over here is, but getting it so that we can all understand it and relate to it first. That's probably what I would do, so that, regardless of who you were, like you said, 20 some years down the road, you can look back and be like, I look at it like my economics and my English teachers, like my favorite teachers, that I had growing up. Those teachers had a knack for salesmanship because they had a knack for making it relatable to everybody. They found some sort of passion within themselves that they were able to communicate and make it seem like, hey, this actually is kind of fun. When you can make people who have no interest in what they're learning suddenly become interested in what they're learning, I think that is when you've done your job as a coach or a teacher.
I would agree, and that's where I get into conflicts with some traditional coaches, where I look at it and say, well, look, you got a bunch of these freestyle kids out here doing stuff in their backyards, and you're saying, well, that you shouldn't promote that. Well, but hold on a second. Let's look at what you just said. We've been able to be more successful getting these guys to want education. They make tutorials. I have kids right now in Sweden making tutorials for us right now.
Nice.
Legit right now. No pay, no nothing, just because they understand the value of it, right? We have other ones that say, I want to volunteer at this event. I'll be a mat thrower for the day. You know what I mean? I'll do this. And they're volunteering themselves now because they
Yeah.
understand what it's all about. And I talked to another cheer coach, actually. It's kind of funny. And he said, and maybe you can relate to this. Well, I'm like, why can't you just get your athletes to care that much about, about safety and this, that, and the other? He's like, well, they
Yeah.
won't ever do it. They will never do it unless I force them to. And I'm like, well, I don't have to force my guys to do it. So who's done really the coaching here? Because we've been able to actually inspire them to want education where previously they just literally didn't care. You know, that to me is the battle we've been fighting. And I think that's where people are looking at us in the wrong context, thinking we're promoting one thing, but we're actually making them want the thing that they think that they should in the first place. We were just starting a step earlier that they forgot actually exists.
Right. Yeah, I think it's if you can add value to that person, add value to the thing that they've, remind them why they got excited about it in the first place, and add value to their learning experience. I think that they will be a fan of yours for life. Whether or not they agree with everything you did or said, they will still respect the fact that you uh, provided them with the value and the wherewithal to care about what they were learning. Like I said, I had Mr. Kenyon. Shout out to Mr. Kenyon, a wonderful economics teacher in high school, who I don't remember the moment, but I remember a moment that really made me think like, this is going to be a good class. And it was my first day in his class because I had to transfer. I had already transferred from one school to another, and then I had to transfer from one really crappy teacher's economics class to Mr. Kenyon's. So I, transferred twice within the course of like 2 weeks. So my first day in his class, he had these, kind of like gee whiz facts, these little extra point things that you can, do on the board. And the first day, I think the question was, who has the world's smallest economy? And I had just watched The Truman Show like the weekend before. So I was just joking around, just messing around. And I said, nobody was answering. And I was kind of, reluctant to answer because I was the new guy, but I was just like, Fiji. And he stopped dead in his tracks, turned and looked at me and said, how the hell did you just get that? And I was just like, I don't know. Right? I was like, I don't know. And so he was just shocked because he was like, I've had that question on the board for 5 years, every year around this time of year. No one's ever gotten it. But in that moment, not only did he make what I was about to learn fun, but he also showed me that he really cared about the things he was putting on the board. He really cared about what he was about to teach me. And then very similar with Mrs. McFadden, my English teacher in 10th grade. She is the one who awakened my passion for vocabulary. And I didn't even think that that was something I would be interested in. But because of how she taught it, and because she didn't make it seem nerdy at all. She made it seem like, this is something that is, that not a lot of people put a effort into learning, like it did something. There was something in the way that she taught that made it fun. It made it important. And I started noticing the value was adding to my life when I was practicing, because she made us employ those words throughout our week. And so I started noticing people saying, wow, you got a great vocabulary, or wow, I haven't heard that word in years. I'm impressed that a 15-year-old knows that word. I was like, wow, this is value she's adding to my life. And so I think when you make that kind of connection with your athletes or your students, that's when their passion really starts to come alive, because you're showing them, I truly do care about what I'm about to teach you, or what I am trying to teach you. So.
And here's the actual value. At the end of the day, you can care all you want, but if there's no real value and you didn't get to
and here's the value.
Other people that then said, oh, maybe I want more. Because what's education? Learning something small and then saying you want more of it because what that value brought to you. So if someone doesn't want to listen to you or pay attention to your class or whatever it is that you have to offer, it simply means they just don't care, which is partly them, but it's also partly you, because if you're a good salesman, you can sell a pen.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. And I think if coaches looked at themselves as salesmen and women, I think you could change this dogma about mental problems and this, that, and the other, and they would see a lot more success and a lot more of a hands-off approach, rather than thinking that I'm here because I'm a professional and because I must know what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. And they put themselves almost on a pedestal, almost accidentally, because they kind of,
Yeah.
there's a lot of coaches that accidentally do it because I think they're trained to put on the nice jumpsuit and all that sort of stuff and put themselves up because that demands respect. It means that the kids are going to listen and the kids are trained to that. So the whole world is under that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of dissolving now with everything going on. And now it's, hey, I have a lot of different stimuli. I have all these different sports you could choose from. Here's why you should pick mine instead.
Yeah. And
And
it's really interesting because I remember taking a coaching course that was mandatory for my district when I was full-time coaching at a high school. And this was years ago. But it it showed me that there was something that I learned with unknowingly about the body language of coaching. When I was watching you do this, I was like, I remember being a young coach and thinking because of the title, I was expected or respect was owed to me.
automatic, yeah.
And Simon Sinek has this great quote where he says, "A leader without a title is much better than a title without the ability to lead." And that's something that definitely started making more sense as I got older because I realized that I was connecting more with the athletes subconsciously through my body language and through my approach by understanding I'm not better than you and I'm not thinking that I'm better than you. I appreciate you respecting me when I'm speaking because who likes to be interrupted? But if you choose to listen to what I'm saying, that's completely on you. It has nothing to do with my ability to or not to be able to coach you. But this class taught us about body language, and so it was funny because the instructor, who's a football coach, he asked for a volunteer. I raised my hand and I go up, and he's like, "Okay, stand." He's like, "Stand here and pretend that I'm an athlete and stand right in front of me." And so I was standing there like this,
Oh,
and
no.
he said, "Right," and he was like, and it's funny because tell me this, Greg. This actually doesn't necessarily mean that I'm trying to close myself off from you from a psychological body language standpoint. This usually, when people do this, they're uncomfortable in the situation and they're trying to console themselves. They're trying to find comfort.
Well, it could be both. You don't know what they're blocking. They're blocking something.
Right.
Check out Paul Ekman. Obviously, I'm sure you heard that name come up a couple times in that class. And they do a behavior, and it's very easy to jump to what that behavior means. But you
What it
don't.
means, yeah.
The context, again, like you said earlier, really is important. You could be blocking yourself from a memory of your dad beating you when you were a kid because you saw the color red, which was the same color of his belt. You have
Right.
absolutely no idea what they're blocking, but you know that they're blocking. So it means tread carefully.
Tread carefully. So I stood there like this, and I remember being prompted to do so. So I'm standing there like this, and he said, "Now, when you're standing here, you're definitely taking more of an authoritative approach to what you're trying to communicate, right? And you are creating a barrier between it's us versus them when you're standing in front of an athlete." And so he said, "Now come to my side and stand next to me." And didn't even realize that I had when I stopped being a head coach when I was younger, and I had like 6 years off. And then I jumped back into doing my Coach Lain business as a consultant, basically. And I no longer had the pressures of being a coach for a gym. I was free and untethered to, like you said, be neutral when I go to different programs, which I love. There's no association there. So, or what's the word? No loyalty, there. So anyways, he was saying that standing next to them is much more friendly. It's you're on the same level, and it's less of I'm going to talk at you. I want to talk with you. And I think that's huge when we are coaching, to remember that you're going to get much more respect out of your athletes, just as human beings, by showing that you're trying to empathize with what they're going through instead of always berate and critique and no, 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 do this, do this, do this. So I think it's really big just to be aware of all those different things.
Yeah, well, body language is a big one, and it's funny. I'm looking through videos, and I was making some tutorials about stuff, and all these videos I'm looking at, and I seen the coach like this on the beam, like this in the middle of class.
Wow.
Mean, like, what do you? And my coaches were very good at this. They said no one sits during training. Now, of
Yeah.
course, love my coaches. Shout out to Doran and Titus, but they sat during training. So
Yeah.
they exactly, but It's still stuck with me, and I've never sat during training. And sometimes I'll catch myself after like an 8-hour day, and I'll sit down for a second, I'll jump right up, like it's automatic in my head. No,
Same.
okay, got to get up, go, 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 and I'm just
Yes.
something to do because when you're on, you're on, and
Yeah.
the body image, like you said, is part of that game. Do you stand with your hands like this, hands in the pocket? No way, Jose. Hands
Right.
open. Yes, kids, let's go. You, blah, blah. Lots of movements, lots of engagement. People want to see you moving and doing stuff. And that, to me, it's not the technical stuff I tell people, because most coaches know that. It's more about the salesmanship that everyone has. It's a little bit different for everybody, but that's what I think most of my success in coaching, and not to say like I'm a guru or anything, but just the success I have had with it has been simply because of my excitement with it. And the kids actually feel like I'm talking to them, and I'm with them, and I actually give a crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, they distance themselves, and that's automatically causing an issue.
Yeah, even like you said, distancing yourself, even being across the floor and giving a correction, which I tend to do during warm-ups, or if we're doing stations and it's too much for me to go back and forth, and I've had kids waiting in line to get spotted. Of course, I'm going to be like, Nicole, don't do that. It happens. But I also have a personal relationship with Nicole already as a coach, so she already knows my coaching style. It's a lot different. But if you're the coach that's always hands off, that's always across the gym, just watching, or you're sitting like that, one is huge. If you're sitting like this, or you're always standing like this, when is the athlete going to feel like they can approach you with a problem or with a question? Never, And even if you don't physically spot them, get in their space to let them know, like, hey, I want to talk with you about what I just saw you do. I don't want to talk at you. I want to actually help you come to a resolution about that frustration you keep feeling, because it seems like you just keep trying and trying and not changing anything. So yeah, it's huge.
It is, and one thing I never thought about for a while, and this was many years ago, but just getting down at the same level as the kid. When it's a small kid, just get on one knee, like
get on a knee,
and hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah, and I want you to do this, and we're gonna do that. What do you like to do? And just being more equal, and I think that's what these kids nowadays are looking for. And I think gymnastics fought it, but I don't think that they're not gonna get away from making this change. They're gonna destroy their sport if they don't start. They're getting there, but keep it moving in the positive direction. So I'm trying to be a nice guy here. It's very tough for me sometimes. I'm always trying to be positive, where in my head I'm like, I
want to talk about this so bad. No, you're doing a good job. It's I think it's, for the matter of discussion, it's it's good, but I think let me just testify. If you want to have a real gritty conversation with Greg, just give him a call, and he will talk to you about whatever you want to talk about, and just give you brass tacks. He will just lay it all on the line. And I really did appreciate that. Like, I didn't know you from Adam, before, and just that first conversation, I was like, I like the way this guy talks. He just tells it how it is. And but you don't do it in a way that's like, oh, you're wrong, even though you might say, well, you're wrong. But you're not doing it in a way that's like, well, no, what you say doesn't matter. It's only about what I say. It's just, no. I think that's a crappy idea, and that's what I think.
Think of it more as inquisitive. Like, all right, well, I think this, and I'm almost wanting you to destroy what I have to say, because as soon as you destroy what I had, it means, oh, okay, I could have built it better, and he just taught me how to do that. Great, and people don't like that, because they feel that they have to tear themselves down as they do it, but I don't know. There's nowhere to build if you're not going to tear down the muscle fibers before you build the new ones.
There you go.
I don't see how you're going to be better at anything ever if you're not going to be okay with that. So buck up or get out. I just don't see how you can live life. And, I think Mark Twain said something like this, the best thing about, not lying is I don't have to remember the truth, or something like this.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I'm going around to a lot of different people and dealing with a lot of different situations that people don't connect. It's not like I go into one gym where everyone knows and I know my dialogue. I actually have to think for myself, because I'm going to new people. And if I say one thing to one person on camera, but something else over there on all these different interviews, I've already done 3 today. And now all of a sudden my stories don't line up. And I don't know about you, but I smashed my head a bunch of times. So I'm not trying to remember anything. I want to be real so that I don't get caught. I can make a mistake, but it's not just, you said this and then not this. And that's, to me, the value of just being honest and sometimes brutally honest, which adds a little flavor, a little hot sauce if we're bad.
Yeah. But I think that's what it is. You enjoy a good tete-a-tete. You want to have that
Game.
Yeah, you just want to have that what do they call that before repertoire or no repartee? Sorry, repartee. You want to have that.
Your English teacher did a number on you.
The repartee. It's usually like the what you see in movies when two enemies are about to battle. It's the dialogue that they have before that battle, And so I think that's really cool because that comes from an intellectual place. A lot of people see that as like, oh, combative, or like what I used to get when I was coming up was, oh, you're hard-headed. Like, why do you always have to ask why? I just realized a couple years ago, I'm a terminally curious person. So if we're having a discussion and I don't understand what you've told me, I'm not just going to take it. I'm going to say, well, why? Or tell me more, help me understand that better, because that is how I teach. So that is also how I expect to learn, is to understand a concept completely. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it makes people have an aversion. The people that have an aversion to the way that you are is because they don't like challenging their own comfort. Bottom line. And I will stick to those guns to the day I die, that, human beings have a natural aversion to comfort, and they don't like being forced to challenge that comfort. They don't even like having the choice, to be honest with you, but they especially don't like being forced to do it.
I think they only like it when they're forced to like it, like you said. And the problem is, in the gymnastics world right now, no one's forcing it.
No.
Why do you need to be a better coach? And no offense, but you still get the job done with a crappy coach as an Olympic coach. They both will get results. At the end of the day, it's not as many results, but you're still going to have the normal distribution, which means you're still going to end up, if you throw enough kids at a crappy coach, they're still eventually going to get a world champion at some point.
Well, look at Dominique Moceanu. Look at the relationship she had with her coach. He was apparently a very abusive and crappy coach, and she was the highest level performing athlete for all those years, and now has nothing good to say about that crappy coach. You know what I mean? And it's like, after all those years, after all that money, after all that heartache, and after all that hustle, wouldn't you like to be able to say, my coach taught me how to be a better person? But she can't even get to that point because it's just bad memory after bad memory. And being a kid and being driven, a lot of kids don't feel like they have a choice. And that's where a lot of these coaches have the upper hand, because they're driving these kids like workhorses. And like you said, if you put enough hours in, if you put enough, bodies in the mix, you're going to churn out a champion with that process. But are you churning out better human beings? I would much rather have a squad or a team of 20, and those are 20 phenomenal humans, even if there's only one or two honorable mentions on that team. You know what I mean? Like, that I can say, yeah, but these are just great athletes. So, yeah, I think that's huge. It's gotta be about more than just, I don't know, repetition and regurgitation, and there has to be challenge.
Yeah, you got to be challenged, and I would say that what's going to happen in gymnastics and trampoline and all this stuff is that you're going to start seeing a lot more crossover between the different sports, and kids that want to do a bit of tumbling, a bit of double mini, a bit of gymnastics, and all that, and they won't want to commit as much. The average lower, like the top tier, always, they're just, but
Yeah, right.
I think you're going to see a lot more crossover, and we're seeing that with the tricking parkour, freestyle tramp guys. They're all crossing over because they're saying that not one thing is ever going to really satiate me. Like, do you ever same food every single day? No, we want to mix it up. So now that there's more opportunities to mix it up, and online training and online coaching and just different brands trying to make it work for the kids, obviously for the money, but still a lot more opportunities than before. So you didn't have to. Back in the 60s, 70s, if you were a good gymnast, you stuck to that because that was the only option you had. And that was,
exactly.
I get how you get stuck in that, but they're going to have to realize it's a new world. New opportunities means you got to compete for your gym club, and your sales are going to determine how much coaching success you have, a lot more than just your technical expertise, which anyone can just get online anyway.
Yeah. I find it interesting. I've had in the last few years, I've had 2 or 3 trickers turn cheerleaders, which is, I was talking to you about that last week. That's been a really interesting journey with those crossover, because that's teaching me something about tricking and about the technical aspects of skills that are altered or overlooked for trickers, right? And I know you know this from gymnastics and tricking. Like, doing a round off in tricking is all about centripetal force, and that kinetic energy that you're able to generate for that twist you're about to do, or that, quadruple corkscrew or whatever that you're about to do afterwards. Whereas a round off in power tumbling and gymnastics is about distance building and momentum building, like being able to get distance and momentum. So it's really interesting having those crossovers. I've also had a lot of gymnasts reach out to me. And it's funny because every time I receive a inquiry from a gymnast, like on Instagram, I'm always like, does your coach know that you're reaching out to me? Because I feel like it's such a more regimented discipline. And it's no secret that gymnasts do not like cheerleaders, because they feel like it's the lazy form of their craft and their discipline. So whenever I get those inquiries, I'm always like, hey, yeah, I help everybody. Just know what I'm going to tell you is probably going to go against everything you've ever learned as a gymnast, and and also understand that I don't know everything about gymnastics, so because my background, even though I was taught by gymnasts, my background is heavily in power tumbling for cheer. But yeah, there's always like that nervousness whenever I get an inquiry from a gymnast.
Well, it's pretty funny, we'll get an inquiry from a kid's always, oh, come to my gym, and
yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, and then we get there, and the coach is like, like this. And we're like, what are you gonna do about it? We got right to your source, haha, and it laughs.
Right.
But it just, again, it shows the disconnect. Like, if I'm the coach, I'm wondering, why does that kid like that guy or girl, whoever that they're idolizing in the moment of, and I would be trying to figure it out, and I would try to be bringing that person into the mix. This idea of keep it apart because you're seeing the territory, I guess. I don't know, it just doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for the kids. So my advice to any coach would be, get off your high horse and start exploring other people's territories and collaborate with them instead of trying to, hold everything close to you.
Completely agree.
Yeah, man. All right, man. That was awesome. Thank you so much for the interview. I learned a lot about different stuff, got a lot of great perspectives on different situations that I think everyone can learn a little bit from. Quickly, tell us how people can find you. How can our audience connect with you if they want some tips on tumbling and getting over their fears?
You can start with my website, coachlain.com, Lain, and then I am literally Coach Lain everywhere when it comes to social media. Coach Lain on Instagram is where I am the most active, so reach out to me there.
Perfect. Make sure we do it, guys. This guy's awesome, and we are going to have you back on another episode soon, and we are going to maybe get into some of the dark psychology next time.
Let's do it, man. I'm ready to dive deep. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a few things. There's a big world out there worth exploring, and I'm happy to be able to bring these great experiences right to you through this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast and learned something, please share and take a screen grab of our funky cartoons and hashtag GRT certified for a chance to win a shout out to our community. Also, please leave us a review to be part of helping this information get out into the industry. It's much appreciated. Along with these podcasts, we have a large online content hub that we call the GRT Network, with many other interviews and full tutorials and written content discussing everything about acrobatics. We will be constantly growing this archive of videos like a cross between Netflix and Wikipedia for anyone in the acrobatic industry. We also have a complete online educational program for athletes of all levels that provides a do-it-yourself pathway to success for any acrobat. Check out our constantly growing library of playlists that will teach you anything from tightening up your social media, to how to get around fear, to even learning all the biology that underlies all your acrobatic skills. We work very hard with our team around the world to provide this exclusive content for you and appreciate any donations made to the FTA to help keep these episodes coming at you. And if you want all the content, become a GRT Network full member to get exclusive content before everyone else and access to special discounts and giveaways through our amazing global partners. Thanks guys, see you next episode.